well, in person, but not in spirit. Now, oh yeah, I mean, because it makes a difference. Because you're like,
It does. Oh, yes.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm following my friends closely who've lost a parent or two, and
Mm-hmm.
I see you. It's like I see you. I get it. I get it. And you
Yeah,
all,
yeah.
it's just.
Stand by.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Thank you. Let's have a great show. And you were told that I'm going to be on mute while the pastor's on. Pardon me, but I know that it can be a little. It can throw you off to hear the printer, but I've got to do
Change
it.
the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am free.
Hey, everybody, the Santita Jackson Show. It is Friday. Can you believe it? Friday, on the 10th of November. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Gonna work that out. Hey, it's Friday, November 10th, 2023. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. I want to do something a little different today as we talk about all of these issues. What to you is the story of the week? Has it been the debate? Has it been Joe Manchin and the turmoil that throws the Democrats and the Senate into? Will he run for president? As we look at Robert Kennedy, as we look at Cornel West, could he also, in this era of the independent, could he throw the election? Not throw the election. I mean, could he make a difference? Could he become president? Could Robert Kennedy? Could Cornel West? I mean, look, it's all out here, everybody. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. We're going to have a young man, Aaron Neerman, from If Not Now. You have a lot of Jewish activists, particularly young people. But, it's just interesting, not particularly young people, but it's interesting to hear the reasoning of the young who are organizing for Palestinian justice, for ceasefire, for peace, for the ending of what they term as the apartheid state in Israel. Israel doesn't have to be an apartheid state, but it's in a state of apartheid, and they want that to end. And so it's important for us to not conflate a right-wing government with all Jews everywhere. It's not fair, which is provoking a rise in anti-Semitism, but also Islamophobia. Told you, you and your enemy are tied together, your opponent, as we have pushed a pro-Israel policy. We've also pushed an anti-Arab policy, but they're linked together. So as anti-Semitism rises, as anti-Islamophobia, as Islamophobia rises, so does anti-Semitism. That's just the way it works, everybody. We are tied to each other, whether we like it or not. God promised you a place at the table in the presence of your enemy, because the enemy, your opponent, is God's child too. So we're going to talk with Aaron Neerman about the activity. They were at the Statue of Liberty, Jewish Voice for Peace, just so many of these organizations are coming together, and they are pushing for a ceasefire. 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire, but not the Congress. What's up? Well, dark money, and that needs to end. The Congress needs to vote the way you need them to vote. So we're going to talk about that and activism and the history of the attacks upon activism, particularly upon peace activists. Ultimately, those people who worked for Dr. King, and my parents were among those who were his staffers, they said it wasn't desegregation that got Dr. King taken out. He lived through that period. It was his speaking up against the military industrial complex, this $1 trillion industry. When he spoke, he was the keynote speaker at the largest march up to that point in the United States, in the history of the United States, in New York City, more than 1 million people. He gave the keynote address. People said, he could lead this movement. When he gave his speech at Riverside Church, calling for an end to the war, his opposition to the war, Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, his chief of staff, said, "Martin, you've just signed your death warrant, your death sentence." He said, "I know, but it's the right thing to do." People who support peace oftentimes meet a less than peaceful end. So let's talk about that today. Call me at 773 763 WCPT. Let's get some of these headlines out the way so we can get to this good news today. Israel said it would pause fighting in the Gaza Strip for 4 hours a day to distribute food, medical supplies, and allow people to evacuate, U.S. and Israeli officials said yesterday. The pauses will take place in a different area each day. The U.S. has urged Israel for quite some time now to agree to longer pauses amid a humanitarian catastrophe. Tens of thousands of civilians have fled fighting in Gaza's north. 1,400 Israelis were killed on October 7th, but more than 10,000 Palestinians have been killed since that time in attacks by the IDF. And according to Al Jazeera, more than 2,800 people are buried under the rubble. Wow. Democratic Joe Manchin said he won't run for re-election next year. But what will he do? The Democrats' razor-thin Senate majority is under threat in 2024, and Manchin, who has been governor of West Virginia in this red state, he has held this West Virginia seat as a senator since 2010, even as the state grew more conservative. Well, ultimately, even though Democrats had to compromise to the right, they were able to depend upon his vote, but now no more. Some Democrats fear Manchin, whose announcement came yesterday, could run for president as a third-party candidate, hurting President Biden's chances of re-election. The U.S. government has started preparing for another shutdown. That could happen in 7 days. We will see if that will happen. More kindergartners than ever are missing their childhood vaccinations. The percentage of kindergartners whose parents opted them out of state-required vaccines rose to a record level during the school year, according to the CDC. We're going to have to get some of these parents on so they can talk about it. In Chicago, we'll have a high of 49 degrees, partly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 40 degrees, cloudy. In the NFL, well, what do you know? Chicago Bears beat the Panthers 16-13. Now, they have, two of the worst records in the NFL, but look, I'll take the win. I will take the win. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be playing the Spurs tonight. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. How you doing, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing great. As I was going to try and trill that R like Tony the Tiger. Remember when he used to do, all right. Yeah, there you go. I got it. I got it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. But you tell me, number one, how could we worship with you and everybody get her book? I see you, sis.
Yes.
I see you, sis. I see you, sis. You're going to see your sisters all up in it. How can we get you? You can go to Amazon and get the book, but how can we worship with you?
Absolutely.
And can we see old sermons? Are they archived?
Absolutely. So if you go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel, the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, you will be able to see past and present term and future sermons. So we invite you to subscribe today. In addition, you can join us every morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for morning worship on YouTube.
All right. Well, I need some good news. Boy, has it been a crazy week for me, but I'm praising God all day long.
Yes. Well, we are encouraged in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 28. And Jesus says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." I am always listening to gospel music, as so many of us do. And there was a song that came out several years ago, "Take Me to the King" by Tamala Mann. And I can recall when I heard that song for the first time and thinking, what an opening line. The first thing she says is, "Truth is, I'm tired." And one gets the impression that we've eavesdropped or walked in on the conversation already in progress, where perhaps someone has asked Tamala, "How you doing, girl?" To which she responds, "Truth is, I'm tired." In 4 words, Mann echoes the sentiments of so many. In 4 words, she expresses what most are afraid to say. Why? Well, to quote another well-known artist, Lizzo, because, truth hurts. But I'm wondering if there's anyone on the line today that can be truthful about the truth of their tiredness. the facts of their fatigue, who is willing to be real about their restlessness. Is there anybody on the wave today that can say, truth is, Pastor Tish, I'm tired? Who am I talking to today? Tired of working, tired of paying bills, tired of cooking, tired of the rat race. Truth is, I'm tired. I'm tired of talking to these kids. I'm tired of having the same argument. I'm tired of being with them. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of being with myself. Truth is, I'm tired. Tired of always coming to the rescue, tired of being taken advantage of, tired of putting everyone first, tired of trying to figure out what your problem is and why you have an attitude. Santita, we're tired. We're tired of crying, tired of living in shame, tired of being depressed, tired of smiling on the outside and dying on the inside. Too tired of pretending that everything is all right when we're not all right. We are tired of these wars. We're tired of massacres. We're tired of witnessing the murders of the marginalized and children. We're tired of ridiculous rhetoric that ain't Bible-based. We're tired of the looming threat of another world war. Truth is, we're tired. We're tired of police brutality. We're tired of racism, blatant, systemic, or otherwise. We're tired of empty apologies with no effort to affect change. We're tired of having to defend our rights to have equal rights. We're tired of inept, imbecilic, imperialistic administration. We are tired, and we need rest. And in the midst of all of that, isn't it wonderful to hear Jesus say, welcome to the party, come unto me. And I say welcome to the party because this is an invitation from Jesus, that just when we see light creeping through the end of the trial and tribulation tunnel, that light is overshadowed by the truth of our tiredness. But Jesus says, come, rest. Jesus says, welcome to the party. And this is not just any party. This is not the party that you have the stress about throwing because it's a surprise party. It's not the pain of your pity party. It's not the pressure and polarization of your political party. It's not the social awkwardness of your office party. No, when Jesus plans the party, this party is one that brings rest, joy, and healing to our weary souls. He says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus gives us an invitation, an open invitation to all of us, whosoever believeth in him, whosoever follows him, whosoever shall come in the name of the Lord shall be saved. Repeat to yourself, welcome to the party. This is a restful party. This is a rejoicing party. This is a rejuvenation party. And the thing that I love about the invitation from Jesus is that it's a casual invitation. Not a formal invitation, but a casual invitation. What's the difference? A formal invitation is like a wedding invitation or a dinner party invitation where the paper is embossed with gold lettering. But Jesus' invitation is more like that 8-pack of invitation that you see hanging in the drugstore in the card aisle. But that's encouraging because that's Jesus telling us, however you come, just come. All you need to know is who's going to be there, what time it is, what I need you to do. There's no pressure in Jesus's party. It's a casual invitation that everyone is invited. In Jesus, you can dance amid the storm. If you spill something at the party, don't worry about it. Jesus will absorb it. If you get dirty at the party, don't worry. Jesus makes you clean. I just want someone to be encouraged today that there is a casual invitation from you to the table of God. You don't have to be finely dressed. You don't have to be Ivy League educated. You don't have to be a Bible scholar or have an 800 credit score. You can make mistakes and still be welcome to the party. So today, for all of you who are having the pity party, for all of you who are suffering angst in the midst of everything that's going on, Jesus says, come, welcome to the party. And that's the good news.
I love you. I needed that
I love you too.
today, and I appreciate you more than I can say. I mean, really.
Same. Welcome to the party, Santita.
Yeah, because I am tired. You know, I mean, I'm tired. I am tired. But it's all right. You know, it's all right. It's all right. Because when I'm weary, the Lord lifts me up, and it's okay. Tired of having the same argument, the same discussion every day. I'm tired. I am tired. I am tired.
Yes.
I'm tired. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired. I'm tired of people not thinking that poverty is something that we can't end, that wars are something we can end. I'm tired. I'm tired of wickedness. I'm tired of evil. I'm tired of us calling people crazy when they're just mean and evil. Tired of it.
That's right. That's right.
What we're witnessing now is evil. Oh, so and so's crazy. No, they're not crazy. You just mean. You're evil. You've been overtaken by the devil, by the spirit of the devil. And I rebuke it in the name of Jesus. All that is holy. Whatever your belief system, got to believe in something higher than yourself. I'm tired.
That's right.
And thank you for speaking to that girl. It just made me go, wait a minute, what? Yeah, I am tired, but I'm not weary. I'm not weary.
Amen. Amen.
I'm not
Amen.
weary. I'm not weary. I'm not weary. And I thank you. I thank you for that. That's why I'm so excited that we're gonna have this young man on today, because there is a new spirit rising in the world, everybody, with our children, and they see another world. See, when Reverend Jackson ran for president 40 years ago, that was something you couldn't even imagine. Now they've seen it. That has been broken. When my parents were born, what Dr. King did, Dr. King gave them a world and really gave us all a world that we couldn't even imagine. He said, I have been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. I might not get there with you, but guess what? You're going to get there. But you better, you need to understand history, because you act foolish once you get there, because you forget all that it took to get you there. So you listen to Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams today and be tired, but don't be weary, but be tired of all the lies and get out here and vote and make the world right. Oh, I love you. Thank you for that today. I needed it more than I can even say.
Love you too.
Oh, I see you, sis. Get that book. And I see her. I see you, sis. Dr. Shanina Knighton. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Oh boy, I feel like going on now. There it is. That's what I feel like doing now. So you tell me what's on your mind today.
So it is actually interesting, Santita, because have you been following what's going on with Amazon?
What do you mean?
Amazon, so when it comes to healthcare, they're actually changing the game when it comes to healthcare by
Yes.
offering medical healthcare for that $9 a month. Did you
Yes.
see that? So,
Yes, I
like, long
did.
story short, membership,
What do you
having
think
high
about that?
quality primary. So that's what I wanted to kind of just get into a, casual conversation about today, because that in itself, when you think about the fact that somebody will have access to being able to virtually talk to a primary care person, be able to share their concerns with, let's say, almost immediate access, it's going to change the healthcare system for sure. Because some of the services that these facilities rely on for patients to come in and be able to see them, you and I both know that think about it, if I got insurance, my copay is about $30 just for that one visit, let alone if I got to go multiple times during the month, right? So now they talk about $9 a month, and then it's like for an additional $5, you subscribe to a low prescription plan. And so looking at that model, and you say, let's look at primary care providers that will be in facilities, you ask yourself, like, okay, well, what does that mean for the healthcare system? And that shows that the way in which it is currently functioning is not sustainable. The other thing that I do wonder, and I've, voiced this concern, is what is going to happen when it comes to equity. So meaning we're already having issues of, let's say, minorities not feeling as if their concerns are heard, their, situations are not being addressed. So I'm just curious to see, given the big monster that Amazon is, and monster not in a bad way, but just thinking about like their depth, about how they'll use, let's say, AI and different technologies to actually string together people's signs and symptoms, their complaints, to be able to come up with better decision making as it relates to what their chief complaints are. So I'm curious to know if this is going to help or if it's going to hurt. Because the disadvantage, even though I've just given advantages, the disadvantage is if someone isn't heard clearly or someone isn't acknowledged in a manner, let's say if they really do need to be in person seeing someone, but they're trying to get by with one of these virtual visits, but really needing to be in front of someone face to face to get their illnesses addressed. So it's going to be an interesting ride, but I think it's something that we should continue to pay attention to, just because it is here and it's absolutely going to change the way in which healthcare is done, especially for small business owners, right, who are having to pay high premiums for insurance. It's going to be interesting to see how a lot of them bring into the fold this $9 a month just by being a Prime member.
It should not. I mean, and the primary driver of bankruptcy today is still what? Healthcare costs.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, I've got insurance and I come home and I got a huge bill. I'm like, what's the deal?
It's getting closer to your universal health care. It's not ideal or ideally universal health care, but to me it's interesting because it's definitely a game changer and one that I feel is moving in that direction. So.
All right, I love it. Dr. Shanina Knighton. Hey, Dr. Nina, everybody. Let's talk about the military-industrial complex. Let's talk about the young Jewish voices who are pushing the peace. Back in just a minute. Thank you, Dr. Knighton. You know, we need to dig down in that.
Yeah, I do agree. And I mean, I know it's new just as of a couple of days ago when it was just announced, but I'm still kind of doing my homework on it. And I am going to sign up because I want to see how it works. I really do. I think I'm very curious, more so than anything else, to understand. You know, it's like you got to experience in order to be able to talk about it. And so I want to be able to experience it. But based off of what it is that I'm reading, it's definitely.
Alrighty, Miss Jackson, we have Attorney Hoffler, Dwight McKee, and Dr. Gibbs here.
Okay,
definitely interesting.
Well, you know, I'm just.
Hi, Dr. Knighton.
Okay, everyone, just say hello, Dr. Knighton. Identify yourself so she'll know who you are.
This is CK. I just heard it. Good morning.
Hi, CK, and is that Dwight?
It is.
Oh, my goodness, Daddy D. Hi, Daddy D. I'm sorry.
Yes. So what's the time? What are we talking about today? Or what I'm listening to? Because I'll be sticking around.
There's a young man, Aaron Neerman, who's from a group called If Not Now. And it's an umbrella organization of young Jewish activists and just persons who want to end the apartheid state in Israel, who want justice, who want peace. And it flies in the face of what we're hearing. You know, you got a right-wing government in Israel right now, and we've been conflating Jews with what's with Netanyahu, and a lot of people feel that they're not feeling him at all. But but also I think it's important for us to talk about the people who espouse peace. Everyone believes that people who work for Dr. King said, look, what got him taken out, and Dr. King knew that it would take him out. That's why it took him a while to really articulate that
2 minutes.
Thank you. Was his standing up against not just the Vietnam War, but the military-industrial complex. That's what got him killed. And peace activists, that's what happens. That's what gets you taken out. So I think, we need to look at that. But this young man will be coming on, and I'm looking forward to hearing his voice. He'll be on at 7, but I want us to talk about peace activism and, and what it means. And just the protections we have, CK Hoffler, as we push for peace. Do we really have any protections, to speak out and all of that? So it's...
Santita, I was doing some research, some additional research this morning, and I thought I'd look at what's happening on HBCU campuses. Mm-hmm. Are there, in relation to this issue. And I was not really able to find any data, if you will. It's not surprising because people don't report. It wouldn't be sexy to report on what Black students on HBCU campuses feel. and if any positions, if at all, or any activism that's happening on those campuses. But I just think it's interesting that nowhere, and again, I didn't search every single entry. I just
30 seconds.
20-minute search. I wasn't able to find any article that spoke to activity on HBCU campuses relative to the war in Gaza.
Well, you know, they don't want to put that out there because Black people have been the game changers in this. You know, when Reverend moved that needle. No, I'm just saying they're not going to let you know that because the kids who are front and center at these Ivy League universities are the Black and Arab students, for example, because they're the ones who are taking the big hits.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world.
It's a media blackout.
We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about peace today. Peace on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. At the top of the hour, we will have Aaron Neerman from a group called If Not Now. It's young Jewish activists from Jewish Voice for Peace and other organizations. It's really an umbrella organization in which you're going to hear voices that you don't really hear, certainly in the United States and around the world. Young Jewish voices who are speaking out against the slaughter of Palestinians, who are speaking out against the right-wing government of Israel, who want peace, who want justice for Palestinians, and who want peace and justice not just in Palestine and Israel, but everywhere. They're fighting for that. But I also, as I was doing research on this segment, I had to think about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the hit that he took when he stood up for peace. It took him a while, and I get this from my parents and Reverend James Bevel and Reverend Wyatt T. Walker. I mean, because my father and mother were on his staff. They didn't just march with Dr. King. They worked for him for collectively $75 a week that my father had to raise. And the Bevel wing, of which my father was a part, the rebel wing of his staff, because he had a very interesting group of people on the staff. Some people were a little bit more conservative. You know, some people were like kind of radical and out there. That was Bevel, Reverend Bevel. Brilliant. Good man. And they pushed on the war. They pushed on the war on poverty. They pushed. We got to be a part of this because you have to remember, Reverend Bevel pulled in young people like my father, who was like 22, 23. My mother was like 19, and pulled them onto a staff of people who were in their 30s, which was middle-aged then, right? So, long story short, it took, although Dr. King opposed the Vietnam War, he knew that it was going to radically change all of the relationships in his life. And it did. When he spoke April 4th, 1967, 6 p.m. At the Riverside Church in New York, he was looking at leaving the movement because he said, you know, I don't know if I'm useful anymore. And maybe I'll fast unto the point of death. Just because things are coming off, things are not quite where they need to be. And after he gave his speech, he had a sense of relief, but there was a heaviness. And Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, brilliant preacher, who was his chief of staff, walked up to him and said, Martin, you've just signed your death warrant. And he said, I know. But going up against the Vietnam War, calling for its end, that was the right thing to do. Because he was also going up against the military-industrial complex. He'd also just come off of the largest march in American history, in which 1 million people gathered in Central Park to call for an end to the war. And he gave the keynote address, and people said that he will become the leader of this movement. And if he becomes the leader of this movement, it's lights out for this war in the military-industrial complex. So, and people who come up against the military-industrial complex, Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona, Dwight McKee, brilliant sociologist, dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, and Legal Q&A with CK. Thank you for allowing us to move it this week to today. CK, when you come up against this military-industrial complex, you take hits. huge hits. And I wanted Dwight on to give us historical perspective and Dr. Gibbs on as well before we hear from Aaron Neerman. But, and then you're seeing, Arab students, you're seeing a rise in Islamophobia, anti-Jewish sentiment. You're seeing pro-Palestinian students who are being harassed on these campuses. They're being threatened with unemployment. You're seeing a lot of prominent Jewish persons withdraw money from colleges. It's just, we got a lot going on, CK. And it's like it just happened just like that. So what protections do you have when you're demonstrating, CK? Do you have any?
Well, Santita, of course you do theoretically. You have protections when you're demonstrating because the Constitution does guarantee freedom of speech. This is that's why I say technically. We have to look at the academic and technical definitions, and then we have to look at what happens in real life. So technically, if you're demonstrating, there's freedom of speech in the Constitution. That's a constitutionally protected right. So you do have protections, and you should not be prohibited or precluded from demonstrating peacefully. Now, where the rubber meets the road, and where there sometimes is, where we do see engagement of law enforcement of various types, whether it's the military or whether it's law enforcement, the police, sheriffs, and all that, is when demonstrations become violent demonstrations. And sometimes demonstrations become violent demonstrations because of the presence of law enforcement. But when there is violence that erupts, that's different. When we have insurrections and coups d'etats like in January 6th, that's different. Even though they're alleging they were those people who were involved in the coup d'etat, that they were merely expressing themselves, that this is a freedom of speech. Well, that is not. But if you are protesting and if you are an activist, those activities, so long as they are nonviolent, are protected by the Constitution. Now, the question is, who's going to protect you? So let's suppose you are protesting and against one position or another, and you are attacked by another group based on your cultural differences, your bias, or the fact that you are Black, the fact that you have a different religious predisposition, and all those types of things. Technically, those could be considered hate crimes. I mean, we have to really think of where we are in this country. We've seen the successful prosecution of hate crimes, not just in the Ahmaud Arbery murders, but other cases in this country. So when you ask what protections, if when you protest, it's met with opposition and met with people counter-protesting and attacking you based on you being in one of these categories, then that could rise to the point of a hate crime. But even if it is a hate crime, because hate crimes happen all day, every day, all the time, what is the recourse? Well, the Justice Department is the best weapon that we have in this country against hate crimes. But the likelihood of the Justice Department putting eyes on and determining to prosecute based on people being attacked who are peacefully protesting, we don't see that happening a lot. So then you look at the states. You have to look at the states and see, well, what laws are in place to protect people who are peacefully protesting in states? And some states, and actually most states have laws that protect people protesting peacefully. But we see very few cases on a state basis where people are actually protected, where the state prosecutors will step in and will prosecute people who are trying to kill people peacefully expressing their opposition to one position or another.
But
so when we look at the legal framework, the protections are
okay. No, because if I could jump in here, because it seems that some people, the January 6th prosecutions were, to me, a rare thing. But it seems that routinely people who protest for peace, they're the ones who catch all the flack.
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot of cases that have resulted from people who are protesting for peace who are attacked.
Well,
and
no, like
the people
with the
who
FBI,
attack them are prosecuted.
No, I mean, but it's just like the Intercept has been writing articles about, the FBI tracking, peace, peace activists and things like that, because, that's real too, right?
Well, that is really real. What I was focusing on the fact that I'm not seeing prosecution of people who are peacefully protesting, who are targeted. I'm not seeing prosecution of those people who are targeting them. I've really not seen that.
Right.
Now, when the people who are targeting them are government, our U.S. government, that's a whole another issue, because you have entities that are serving as judge, jury, and executioner. So if you've got the FBI that's tracking, like we've seen historically that happened, tracking and playing maybe a destructive role, let's just say hypothetically in any type of abuse, of course we haven't seen prosecution of that. We haven't seen the FBI prosecute and lay down and say, oh, yeah, we did it. It was us. No, we haven't seen that. And I don't think we're going to see that. Is there accountability? Are there checks and balances as it relates to U.S. governmental agencies? To a limited degree. But you have to remember, broad discretion, broad flexibility, broad powers are given to a lot of these agencies of the U.S. government, such as the FBI. So we're not going to see, I've never seen, now I could be wrong, I've never seen, where the FBI has been put in check for its monitoring and maybe taking a more firm role as it relates to quieting the voices of activists.
And see, my point is,
I don't think that.
Well, no, and that's why I wanted to get there now, because the legal cases, and I know this is something that Dwight actually has lived through and seen. You have the laws that are on the books, and you have how law is actually practiced. I mean, because we see what's happening with Cop City, right? Cop City. I mean, they just killed a big actor, a young Hispanic actress down in Atlanta, and they did not tell the truth about how he was killed. He was defenseless. They killed him. And I mean, in Michael Moore, one of Michael Moore's movie, I think it was Fahrenheit 9/11. They were infiltrating peace groups. They're not, our intelligence agencies are still doing that. I mean, today, hold that thought, CK, because really I need you to help us to tease this out. Dwight McKee, what have you experienced?
I experienced the 1968 Chicago Convention, where the police department became the perpetrators of violence on demonstrators who were demonstrating for peace. I experienced Fred Hampton when the FBI went out and shot him to death, he and Mark Clark, because they were really against the Vietnam War. I experienced Dr. King, who was assassinated because he was for peace and had won a peace prize. My experience is that those people who are in many cases, supposed to be law enforcement are the lawbreakers. And it goes all the way from what's happening with WikiLeaks today, where the WikiLeaks crowd is trying to tell the truth and trying to get uncommon information out, and they are prosecuted by the government for telling the truth. So my experience is probably a little different, because I know that there's always been a conspiracy of those people who are in charge of the government to suppress anybody who is anti-government or anti the policies of the government.
Historically, what have you seen, Dr. Gibbs?
Well, I think that we are seeing here right now is obviously a kind of tribal clash between Jews and Muslims and Arabs in the Middle East, and it's being reflected in tribal clashes in Europe and the United States between some Jews and some Arabs and Muslims. Again, it's more complicated because many Jews have opposed Israeli policy, but many have supported Israeli policy. And it is true you're getting a rising threats to both groups, and both groups have encountered dangers in terms of expressing their views. It's becoming so fraught now. There is the danger of violence and the actual fact of violence. We've seen cases of this. I think the instance that is most getting attention, though, is the threat to Jews. We're seeing a lot of that. Jews are unsafe, etc. Let me say I think that's a bit misconstrued in the sense that my sense is the greater threat at this point in time is probably to Muslims and Arabs. I mean, there are threats to Jews that are undeniable, but there is a greater threat, a much stronger, I think, sentiment against Muslims and Arabs in the United States and Europe, at least. And the sentiment does definitely lean to the Israeli side, and it's reflected in most of the attention has been given on the issue of Jewish safety on campuses. And again, I think that's overstated. I mean, the degree of danger here to Jews is not as great as people say. At least that's my impression being on the University of Arizona campus. But I think it reflects the fact that American policy and European policy favors Israel at this point in time. And as a result, there's much more concern. And basically what I'm seeing here, I'll be very direct about it, is the issue of safety and alleged threats and so on is being used as a pretext to shut down as much as possible criticism of Israel and demonstrations and public expressions of disapproval of Israeli policy and of U.S. and European support for Israeli policy. We are getting real threats to civil liberties, open calls to shut down free discussion on this. And it's coming disproportionately from one side. It's coming disproportionately from the pro-Israeli side. And I would say any threats to civil liberties, in my view, any effort to shut down free speech is highly objectionable. That goes for both sides. But this is very heavily tilted, it must be said, in favor of American policy, which favors Israel. And I think that's being lost in this discussion, is that for all the criticism of dangers to Jews and dangers and so on, it's really tilted in the opposite directions as far as I can tell. And I think the asymmetry here, the fact that it's much more Muslim and Arab voices that are being silenced, I think is being lost in this discussion.
I don't think there's any discussion. I haven't seen, to be very frank, and if you all have, I'd love to see where. I haven't seen a lot of discussion in the media about the dangers to Arab families on college campuses. Yeah. I haven't seen all that. That's not been a focus at all of the media. And I'm not saying that what is happening to Jewish students on college campuses is right. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be concerned. What I'm saying is there's been no reporting or very little reporting that I've seen of any threat to Arab students, to anyone who, well, we are seeing now, we have some articles and we can discuss this, when anyone takes a position favorable to the Palestinian position or to the plight of the people in Gaza, I've not seen any reporting or very little reporting of the ramifications, the consequences and what's happening to those families. So there is a tilting, there is a slant, without a question, of the reporting in this country. It's sort of like when I watched on TV recently former President Donald Trump's comments on, because like said TV, well, we're taught we have to watch everything. And he talked about the hostilities against the anti-Semitism, and he said something about, and there probably is something, there's feelings that are probably similar for the other side. Like really downplaying what the Israeli government is doing and executing on the Palestinians. He was just saying, well, there's what he presented was a position of the Israeli government and saying, let's just let this play out, but really recognizing, well, there might be some feelings on the other side too, but really downplaying it.
But that's been American policy. I mean, our own president said he downplayed Palestinian deaths, although the UN said, no, this many Palestinians have been killed. He was like, well, I don't know. I mean, that's been American policy, right?
It has been American policy, doesn't make it right. And I think that
I'm not saying it makes it right. I'm just saying
right.
That's how it's been.
That's how it's been. But the original question about what protections do we have? We don't have any protections. When it comes to theoretically, remember I said theoretically on the books, freedom of speech is protected, but maybe certain types of freedom of speech get publicity and could erupt or be staged for violence. That's one thing. But other types just sort of fall to the wind and are not reported. The media plays a very significant role in the court of public opinion, very significant role on how people perceive the dangers that lurk out there for students. who are victimized by the war in Gaza. Very significant. And unfortunately, Palestinian students or Arab students or people who are sympathetic to the plight of what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza, that whole perspective is underplayed or not even recognized or acknowledged. So the media does have a hand in that.
Their jobs are being threatened. These kids are coming out of school with huge debt, and they're being told their names are being passed around so that they cannot be employed. Those who are pro-Palestinian. I mean, that is like crazy. Do they have any protections in the courts?
Well, see, this is the thing. So it's the same protections that Black people had in the courts when we were being discriminated against in the history of time. To prove that an employer didn't want to hire us because we were Black took a whole lot. Basically, it was very, very difficult. We would have to prove something that no evidence would be left behind, because even now, people don't use the N-word. They don't say, we're not going to hire you because you're Black. They just don't hire you. So what are the protections against them? There aren't really many protections unless there's complete open action against those people that can be traced back. The fact that an employer, when you're interviewing, decides they don't want to hire you, they're always going to have discretion saying, well, and they'll come up with a race neutral or a business justification for not hiring you when we know what the real issue is. So my answer to that is no. There are not a lot of protections. No, they're not. There's not a lot of legal recourse, although there will be cases that will result. There's always that first case, but that first case has got to be where it's blatant, where it's conspicuous, where there's a real strong act of discrimination because of someone's political views. But Santita, that's happened from time immemorial. And there's not a lot of action you can take unless you can directly trace it back. And directly tracing it back is very difficult in terms of proof. But there is going to be some litigation. That case probably is in the works now. There will be litigation where there's been that type of discrimination because of positions that people have taken. But, as employers are like, yeah, whatever. Try to sue me. And I know I have, for instance, had cases where people have failed to hire African Americans, women, the people in a protected class because of their status in a protected class. Very, very difficult. Very difficult. Because of the fact that they will come up with a business justification for their actions. They're never going to say, well, we didn't hire him because of his position. We did some research on social media and saw him protesting. Never will they say that. They'll say, well, he just wasn't a good fit. We found a better candidate. And that's that. So but like everything else in this country, when the fact patterns arise, when the conduct is severely egregious, when you can nail a company that has taken these positions, then there will be litigation. And that is something that will be a changer. But right now, while we're in it, I don't see many legal protections in reality. On the books, yes. But in reality, today, to help those students who are people who are activists, who are standing up for what they believe, whether it's popular or not popular, whether they're Jewish or not, I don't see many protections, and that's the problem.
Well, then one quick minute with Dr. Gibbs. Do you think? I mean, because as you said, when you meet a lot of Jewish people, they read white. When you see Arab people, you know that they're people of color. When you see Palestinians, you know they're people of color, and perhaps that's part of the reason that you because you're the readily identifiable other. Do you think that that these young Jewish activists, they are getting blowback in their communities? They're being called horrible names. Will they get the same blowback that pro-Palestinian protesters get? I mean, to me, blowback is blowback, but there's some blowback that's stronger than others. I've got a minute.
Yeah, I think they will, just because in the Jewish community for a long time, there was this sort of need for unanimity in support of Israel. I remember in the 70s, that was a very strong sentiment. In the 80s, that's been breaking down. Younger Jews do not support Israel like their parents did. And you have significant Jewish dissent, again, mostly among young Jews, on this issue of what's going on in Gaza. And I think there's a certain sense of betrayal by pro-Israeli Jews that results in a lot of very vitriolic reactions to Jews who are participating in these demonstrations about Gaza. And so I think the blowback will be very significant for Jews who do not adhere to the party line on this issue. So I think the sense there is that they will not be exempted from retaliation at all. I think quite the opposite, probably. So I think that basically you do have a problem here of lack of open discussion. One really tragic thing I've seen is just across the board on both left and right, you've got a breakdown in respect for the idea of open debate and free speech. You yourself said talking about cancel culture here, and that really is a problem. And it's a problem on both the left and the right. And now we're seeing the results of it, basically. We can't have an open debate about Gaza, just as we could not have an open debate about Ukraine, because we just don't respect the idea of the legitimacy of debate, that you need to basically retaliate and crush your opponents through coercion rather than debating with them, which is what we should be doing here.
We had a complete breakdown, everybody, but it's been broken for a while. Now it's just very, very obvious. Dr. David Gibbs, Dwight McKee, C.K. Hoffman. We're going to bring up Aaron Neerman in just a few minutes, if not now. Cannot wait to hear his voice. They have a lot of demonstrations, and they're inviting all of us to be a part of them. They're inviting all of us to be a part of them, but let's hear what's on his mind. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Oh boy, CK, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to rush you. I was looking at that clock. Okay.
No,
I was
absolutely.
just trying to get a couple of other
Thank
things
you.
out before Aaron gets on.
Right. No, I mean it's going to be. There's going to be some litigation at some point, but I'll tell you when it'll happen. When tragedy erupts, where someone literally dies, or I'm just being real.
But what do you mean?
There's going to be that case. It's going to take. And I'm not suggesting anything, but what gets court's attention or what gets people's attention is like an Ahmaud Arbery case, right? So hate crimes have been going on forever. Prosecution of hate crimes, not so much. Even though on the books, hate crimes could have been prosecuted. Many states didn't have hate crime legislation. Georgia got it as a result of Ahmaud Arbery's heinous murder. There are millions of Ahmaud Arbery's out there, by the way. But anyway, that case got attention. Why? Because it was captured on video. So that made a difference. So that case became in the recent years, the poster child for modern day hate crime prosecution, successful prosecution. It took that kind of heinous crime being committed and the death of a young, innocent Black man for people to understand and see how hate crimes manifest themselves in today's environment and how they're prosecuted. It took something that significant. And at that time, that was captured on video, at that time in history, it unfortunately, I hope it doesn't, but when there is something that heinous, someone with all of the civil unrest in this country as a result of that war, if somebody, unfortunately, if something happens to someone as a result of that, that's when you will see broader attention because it will be undeniable. If it's captured on video, just like it was with the Ahmaud Arbery case. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean by it's going to take. And I hope that I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong. I don't want anyone going out and saying, let me make a point of that. No, I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. There never should have had to have been an Ahmaud Arbery for people to understand how hate crimes manifest themselves, how they should be prosecuted, how they will be prosecuted. And that was one, and there's thousands and thousands of hate crimes that are committed on a daily basis that go nowhere. So on the books, yes, there are laws that protect and everything, laws that protect all this kind of stuff. But in reality, that's why I said you got to get the attention of the Justice Department, get the attention of state prosecutors, a legal machinery, and that's going to look at the facts and what they can prove.
But you know what? I'm also
because a lot of times.
But hold on, I'm also looking at realpolitik, because the fact is the intelligence community now has the peace movement in their crosshairs, even today. Even with all the experiences that we've had, that's what they do. And, and I'm reading this headline from the NPR: for some Jewish peace activists, demands for a ceasefire come at a personal cost. And it, to me, is concerning to me that this $1 trillion industry has this much power. And this is what our former president, a general, said: do not let this happen, y'all. This is going to be a mistake. It's going to change us materially and spiritually. And it's happened. I think that we have, Dwight and Dr. Gibbs. I think we've got to talk about it as we bring Aaron Neerman on.
Well, Santita, it has happened, but it has happened, but it's been happening for a while. But yes, it has happened. It has happened in this country, and we are already a divided country. Mm-hmm. We're already a divided country. So this is more division. And the reporting is the reporting. I don't ever have an expectation that there's going to be fair reporting on some issues. I don't know.
Ms. Jackson, yes. Attorney Fancher, and Aaron Neerman are here.
Okay, and I'm going to mute. Hold on one second. I want to mute them, everyone, so that I can have a one-on-one with Aaron Neerman. But hold on, CK. I want to introduce everyone to Aaron Neerman. I've talked you up so much. And, we're a little protective of you, Aaron, because you're young enough to be everybody's child on here. Not that you're a child. You're not a child.
It's good. But it's good to know I'm in good hands.
You're in good hands, but we're going to handle you like your mama does. We're like, wait a minute. But we want
Wouldn't want it any other way.
Oh, well, you got it, honey. Look, all mamas are the same. But I wanted to introduce everyone to this young man. He is Chicago's own, coming out of Skokie. I'm gonna let you be Chicago though. But
thank you.
But but no. But I think it's important that we have you. I want you to meet Attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's on Court TV as a legal analyst. She's the chair of Rainbow Push, but she is also, I said she has a show on WAOK, iconic radio station, former president of National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world, Dr. David Gibbs, who is historian from University of Arizona. We just love him. And Dr. D. Dwight McKee, brilliant sociologist, who is one of the founders of Operation Push. He's with the National Action Network, and he's the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, and brilliant civil libertarian and civil rights lawyer, attorney Mark Fancher, who is also an author. And so we're very, very happy to have all of you, but we wanted to hear from Aaron. Well, you know what? I won't mute you, but if you all would
1 minute
be on silent as we speak with him, because Aaron, we want to kind of get into what if not now, who comprise him if not now, and what your own evolution has been, because we see generational differences in all of our views, and I just think it's very interesting. And even in the midst of a personal cost.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you.
Did you want us to mute the callers, or were they going to mute themselves?
For having me today, and good morning to everyone. CK,
okay, sounds good.
Ed and Mark, and
you got about 15 seconds.
No
it's great to be here.
No mute. Just leave them up. Okay.
All right. Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. I'm going to pivot to Aaron, but I'm so glad that you all are here. Okay.
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am greedy.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. We're talking about peace today. And what it costs and what it really costs for us to be at war. But there's something very interesting happening. You're seeing a lot of young Jewish activists, a lot of young Jewish citizens who are standing up against what's happening to Palestinians. They feel that the only safety for peace in the Middle East and indeed around the world is ending the injustice toward Palestinians, locking in Israeli security to Palestinian justice, ending the apartheid state. It's just not in the highest and best tradition of the Jewish religion or culture. They are standing up, and they're paying a price for it, but they're willing to do that. They're sitting in, they're demonstrating, and they want you to be a part. And we're so glad that Aaron Neerman, who is one of the organizers from If Not Now, is with us. And I'm going to get to some of these headlines so we can get to this young man, Chicago's own from Skokie. But I told him, I'm going to take you for Chicago. Let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. In Israel, they said they would pause fighting in the Gaza Strip for 4 hours a day to distribute food and medical supplies and allow people to evacuate. The pauses will take place in a different area each day. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin said he won't run for re-election, but many people are fearing that he might run for president as a third-party candidate. Would he disrupt President Biden's chances for re-election? We'll explore that more next week. The U.S. government has started preparing for another possible shutdown. Federal funding is set to expire in 7 days. More kindergartners than ever are missing their childhood vaccinations, according to the CDC. It increases the outbreaks of highly contagious and dangerous diseases. Got to talk to these parents and find out what it is that has them concerned about vaccines. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 49 degrees today, partly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 40 degrees and cloudy. In the NFL, well, hot diggity dog. The Bears won last night, 16-13 over the Panthers. Good on them. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be facing the Spurs tonight. Let's get right to it. Aaron Neerman, so excited to have you on the show today. Born in Chicago, raised in Skokie, volunteer organizer with If Not Now. He is a tremendous organizer, everybody. It's a movement. It's a movement of American Jews organizing their community to end U.S. support for Israel's apartheid system and demand equality, justice, and a thriving future for all Palestinians and Israelis. It seems to me that you're tying the end of the apartheid state, security for Israelis. You're tying all of that together. You're tying Israelis and Palestinians to one another. Am I reading that correctly, Aaron Neerman?
Yeah, good morning, Santita, and I think you said it really well here. The events on October 7th showed that occupation and apartheid don't keep anyone safe, neither Jews nor Israelis, or Israeli Jews or Palestinians. And basically what we mean to say with If Not Now, what I firmly believe is that our liberation is collective. We won't be free until we're all free. And so I just hope that as a Jewish person, I can stand pretty starkly against the typical carte blanche support of Israel that we see from America specifically. And that's why I and many other Jews have been showing up and demanding a ceasefire, especially right now.
Well, explain your thinking, because it seems like there is we see this generationally with everyone, right? I mean, when my parents were protesting, demonstrating to end segregation, and they were in college, their parents were wondering, what are you doing? I mean, I disagree with segregation, but I don't want you to get into trouble. And my son, my daughter, I don't want you kicked out of school, and I want you to be able to get a good job and make it in the society. But my parents' generation rebelled and said, no, we can't. This is unacceptable. It seems that that's also happening in the Jewish community.
Yeah, I definitely think that is the case. And there's lots of reasons for this. I think part of it is that so many Jews are often introduced to Israel in a very sort of monolithic way, starting with many of our teachings in Hebrew school, or even leading up to bar and bat mitzvahs. There's a lot of mention of Israel and not really tons of mention of what is happening in Palestine, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza. And so we're taught that Israel is a beacon of Jewish safety, and unlearning that or sort of unpacking that more so is something that definitely takes time. And it's hard to pick apart exactly where that starts for different young Jews. But eventually what it ends up leading to is the realization that, this is an apartheid system. There is occupation, a blockade, human rights violations, a siege on Gaza. We need to stand against these things as Jewish people because it is rooted in Jewish tradition. Tikkun olam and tzedek are Jewish values. Repairing the world and justice, in English, there are Jewish values. And we are called to stand up for the oppressed, and that is inherently Jewish of us. And so, I can't speak for all American Jews, but I think unpacking some of what I learned at a very young age was a big part of it. And I've had some important figures in my life, too, that have helped lead me along in that way as well.
Well, what helped you to unpack and look at this differently? Because I was reading an NPR article about a young lady. They called her Allie, and I think they were protecting her identity. 21 years of age, living in New York. She was kicked out of the family Shabbat dinner. She said, her father's a staunch Zionist. She said, you better effing not have gone to that protest. And she said, I really have. He said, don't come back. You're not welcome here right now. Is that happening? Widely? What about tensions within your own families? Because that's a personal cost. This protest, is it coming at a personal cost for some?
Yeah, I definitely think there is some alienation that Jews feel, and that's why I'm so glad to have found community, and if not now, and Jewish Voice for Peace as well. I think that for me, I will definitely recognize Rabbi Brant Rosen was a big figure in my life that helped bring me to some of the conclusions that I stand by today. He was one of the first rabbis to come out staunchly in support and in solidarity with Palestinians. He founded the first non-Zionist synagogue, I believe, in the U.S., and it's actually in Chicago here at Tzedek Chicago. And all that started in 2014 when there was a war on Gaza. And since then, there's been a variety of touch points, whether it was some of the critiquing of AIPAC by Ilhan Omar and AOC in 2020. I realized that a lot of my Jewish peers that I previously had not really spoken much about Israel with felt very differently about AIPAC and about unequivocal support from the U.S. for Israel. And so I will say, luckily, that a lot of my family is at least supportive or interested in some more healthy dialogue. We don't agree on everything, but I have not experienced the sort of kicking out of Shabbat dinner sort of situation there. But I find myself to be lucky, at least, that we can have some productive conversations, even if there is some room for disagreement about next steps in Israel and what we might envision as a long-term solution.
We're speaking with Aaron Neerman, an organizer for If Not Now. Would you say it's an umbrella organization? Because I've heard you also speak of Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yeah, I will say If Not Now hopes to be a bit of a big tent organization to bring in and unify Jews in general, to act as specifically a organization focused on directing American Jews to stand in solidarity with Palestine. But what we've seen recently is a unique sort of coalition building of If Not Now, Jewish Voice for Peace. A few others that come to mind are Never Again Action, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and some other organizations basically standing in coalition and calling for a ceasefire. So that's typically what the broader coalition is, just Jews for a ceasefire. And that's been the kind of broader umbrella that's been emerging out of this rapid response to all of the violence and humanitarian crisis that's been unfolding.
Well, even with this growing community, we've not seen a lot of you in corporate media. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I do think there is a bit of a lack of attention to the large demonstrations that have been happening from Jewish-led organizations in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, especially. And so I think that part of that is the reason why so many of the actions that have been planned recently have been oriented towards disrupting business as usual. It's not enough for us as Jews to take to the streets and march because maybe we won't get the attention that we're looking for. Really, we need to disrupt business as usual. We need to draw attention to ourselves, and we have absolutely been doing that, from shutting down the White House entrances on October 16th to this massive demonstration in the Cannon Rotunda on October 18th. You saw this shutdown. I believe it was thousands of Jews and allies in Grand Central Station, and even in Chicago. I was with a coalition of Jews shutting down Ida B. Wells outside the offices of Senator Durbin and Duckworth demanding that they sign on to the propose a ceasefire resolution in the Senate, especially. And I will also say that there is more to come in the U.S., of course, and also in Chicago, of Jews showing up in this way and saying that we will not accept business as usual when there is a humanitarian crisis and the U.S. has blood on our hands.
We're talking with Aaron Neerman. If not now, these young Jewish organizers and activists, and we can all be a part of this. Can we not, Aaron?
Yes, definitely. I mean, these are, especially Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, are Jewish-led organizations, but we are in community with allies all the time, and we love when they show up with our different events and take on maybe roles of different sorts as well. There is room for allies, and we're actually putting out a call for Monday. We'll have an action, and we're in Chicago specifically, but we're calling Jews and allies to come from all over the Midwest for what will be a massive display of solidarity with Palestinians and Gazans especially, and really disrupting business as usual in our city here. And so, yeah, there is definitely room for allies here, and it is a broader coalition of us that are coming together for these events.
Well, specifically what's happening on Monday and how can you be contacted?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. Well, people can get plugged in a variety of ways. You know, you can follow all of our the upcoming events that are going on our social media with If Not Now Chicago or JVP Chicago. You can just Google either one of those. But if people are directly interested, it's easy to go to bit.ly/Midwest Jews Ceasefire Now. That's Midwest Jews Ceasefire Now. And, you know, we can't give all the details of what will actually go down over the radio, of course, for safety reasons and for some strategic reasons. But that's a great way for people to find out more information. And these demonstrations I mentioned previously have been absolutely massive and successful in all sorts of forms. You know, I was at the Statue of Liberty demonstration just a few days ago now, and there are great opportunities to show that Jews are supporting a different sort of narrative that isn't just carte blanche support for Israel, and instead is a deeply Jewish call to resist oppression in all its forms and demand a ceasefire for the sake of preserving human life, especially.
Well, again, how can we follow If Not Now? Because it seems like these are like flash protests because you're showing up. Because I know Grand Central Station, I'm kind of part New Yorker. You know, well, my friends called me from New York. They were like, we cannot get into this station. This is unbelievable. Statue of Liberty. This is unbelievable. See, people are seeing you and other allies protest in ways that we just quite frankly have not seen, particularly from this particular space. Calling for the linkage of Israeli security, the end of Israeli apartheid, and linking it to Palestinian justice. You're saying, you know, you can't have one without the other. As I know Reverend Jesse Jackson has been arguing for more than 40 years, and others, Jim Zogby and Medea Benjamin. I mean, you've not been alone. You're really picking up the baton from them in this particular part of the race. I mean, are these flash demonstrations? Are you all prepared to be arrested? I mean, where are you with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another really important thing to mention here, where, you know, these demonstrations especially often involve rabbis, elders of all sorts, and many do, in fact, end in arrest. You know, this Rotunda demonstration that I was at in D.C. had over 300 arrested altogether. People are willing to put their bodies on the line, their livelihoods in some ways, and also just, you know, the time and kind of trauma, honestly, that often goes on with arresting for the sake of this cause. And so, yeah, many of these demonstrations have ended in arrest. And really, I don't think the point is to get arrested necessarily at this point, but the point is really to occupy the space as long as possible to demand to be heard. And, you know, if a headline ends up mentioning that 500 Jews are arrested for the sake of this cause, and that gets people talking about it and realizing that, you know, Jews are not a monolith in this sense, and, you know, is not anti-Semitic to critique Israel, to say that we need an end to these war crimes. And I think that these demonstrations are key to countering that narrative. And yeah, just to go back to your question, these are highly planned, highly organized protests. And yeah, there's tons of ways to follow along. If not now, National is posting things and people can get connected wherever they are. And if people want to follow on the Instagram or our social media in general, you can just look up If Not Now Chicago. That's the handle there too.
If Not Now Chicago and Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yep.
Okay. Well, you know what? I wanted to get a couple of these persons who've been listening in on you to give you some words of encouragement in less than a minute, everybody. Dwight McKee is Aaron Neerman. In fact, he came from Operation Breadbasket, Operation Push, Rainbow Push, the youngest board member of Operation Push when Reverend Jesse Jackson was organizing it, and actually went out looking for Bobby Rush in the nights after Fred Hampton had been killed, because the FBI was seeking to kill him. So he has significant experience in the civil rights space. Dwight McKee, when you hear young Aaron, what do you hear in less than a minute?
Well, first, I want to commend you, Ann, for your courage and your principles. Is that you're part of a great tradition. People don't really know that most of the anti-war demonstrations against the Vietnam War was led by young Jewish radicals, Abby Hoffman and the Chicago 8 and that crowd. And they paid a terrible price for their commitment, because the only real protected class in this country is the status quo. And so when you take a position against them, you become opposition. And they move to silence you or to neutralize you. And so it takes a lot of courage. In your situation, the courage is not just a social courage. It's a very personal courage, because the Zionist issues are so intrinsic to the culture of Judaism that you run the risk of running in direct opposition to your parents and to your loved ones. And as Jesus said, it'll create a sword between mother and father, sister and brother, son and daughter. And so that kind of courage is very, very, very rare, and I want to applaud you for it. Prepare to have the best motives, but prepare for the worst responses. Because as pure as you are and as legitimate as you are in your values and your thinking, you're going to be amazed by the opposition and how closed-minded and hostile the opposition will be. So prepare yourself for a meandering journey for righteousness in this situation.
Just know that there are people who are standing with you, Aaron, and I'm going to have you and or someone from your group on Monday. You have a home here on the Santita Jackson Show, because I admire your courage. And hey, I'm a very, very grown woman now, and when I see young people like you, I'm like, the world's in great hands. It's going to be all right. The last 2 minutes belong to you, Aaron. How, what, where? How can we meet you? And just give us a word, inspire us to be with you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the time you've given me today. It's really great to be in community here, and I think that I agree with all the advice I was previously given, and I appreciate it in so many ways. The only protected class is the status quo. Well said there, and that's what we're hoping to do. Both on, we're really hoping to disrupt the status quo on Monday, especially, and moving forward. And so, I guess with this time, really, what I mean to say is that, I and so many other Jews recognize that it is not anti-Semitic to stand against Israeli apartheid and occupation, to say that we need an immediate ceasefire, of course, a release of the hostages, but in general, a de-escalation and an addressing of all of the factors that led to this current violence, this apartheid occupation siege. And so if people want to get plugged in to what's happening on Monday, or if they want to follow along, definitely go to If Not Now Chicago on Instagram, and you can go check out our website too. But if people want to directly get involved, they can just go to bit.ly/MidwestJews ceasefire now. Thank you so much for everyone listening. And yeah, I hope I come back soon, Santita. It's been great to be here with you.
I already told you on Monday, young man, you got to let us know what's happening on Monday. Seriously, you got to come on back because that's how you organize.
Yes,
right?
Definitely. And I think I might have someone else joining you. I think my friend Simone will be there, but I can't wait for y'all to meet as well because you'll be in good community there.
Bring them on. Wait a minute, CK, ladies first. Ouch. So I'm going to let you, I want you to speak to Dr. Gibbs and Mark Fancher and CK during the break before you go. But everybody, please, if not now, Chicago. If not now, Chicago. Peace is possible. And we're going to have it, everybody. We are going to have it. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Aaron, I wanted you to hear an encouraging word from Attorney C.K. Hoffler, from Dr. David Gibbs, and Attorney Mark Fancher. Let me start with you, Mark Fancher, because, when I hear this young man, and Dwight brilliantly brought up, this can be a cleave in families, and you have to be prepared for that, but he's standing on principle. Attorney Fancher?
Yeah, if you don't mind my asking, Aaron, how old are you?
I'm 25, soon to be 26.
Oh, yeah, we're close in age.
Wait a minute, 20 or 30 years ago, I'm the manager.
Give or take 40 years.
Okay.
But no, the only thing I was going to suggest is that you have not yet had the benefit of watching things develop over the course of decades, and it is so demoralizing. It is so frustrating when you're agitating and you're speaking against what seems to be the overwhelming tide of popular opinion, and you think that nothing is going to happen. But what those of us who've been around for a while have been able to see is that those things that you say, the things that you do, those are seeds that take root. They always take root when what you're speaking, what you're doing is grounded in truth, and you don't see it grow sometimes for a number of years. So you just have to hold on to not just a faith, but a knowledge that what you're doing is going to have an incredible impact, if not right away, at some point down the road. So you just have to keep on keeping on.
That's right, because Abby Hoffman was right.
Thank you.
Dr. King was right. Dr. Gibbs?
Yeah, I did want to point out that, what you're doing here in terms of, Jewish opposition to the Israeli policies in Gaza does fall within a Jewish tradition of anti-militarism. There's a long-standing Jewish hostility to the idea of militarism, of glorifying, military solutions over negotiation, of
Ms. Jackson?
Military power.
I have Attorney Jones and Reverend Todd Urey here for you.
Quite rightly, that the anti-war movement to the Vietnam War was led to a significant degree by Jews, and that was part of that anti-militarist tradition. You think of people who opposed the war, not just on the streets, but also people like Seymour Hersh in the New York Times, Daniel Ellsberg releasing the Pentagon Papers. These were Jews who were acting to some extent within the Jewish tradition of opposing militarism. And I think, unfortunately, one of the unfortunate legacies of Israel is to counteract that tradition, which I would see as a positive tradition, and to sort of bring militarism back into the Jewish mainstream. And I see what, Jewish opposition to Israeli policy is doing now, is trying to bring Jewish culture back to its roots in opposing militarism. And I think that's a very positive development, not only in terms of opposing a kind of
1 minute, Ms. Jackson.
Thing we should be concerned about, but also I think bringing Jewish tradition back to its anti-militarist roots.
CK, I've got about 30 seconds. I'm sorry I'm running with you, but I wanted Aaron to get something from us.
No worries. No worries. What I would say is have good lawyers. Remember, have good lawyers. Every city where you protest, you must have good lawyers. It's a well-orchestrated effort. Have lawyers in advance ready for your arrest to help you. That's critically important. If I can help in that sense, I will help. And just remember that
30 seconds.
Built overnight, but it takes brave soldiers to bring about change, and that's what you're doing. So you must have a strong legal team in every single city where you're protesting. Do not go into those places and some of those communities without legal people there ready to get you out of jail, because you're navigating in very dangerous territory, and you never know what lies
Stand by.
A jail cell if you don't have the appropriate representation.
I'm going to get her information to you.
Thank you.
Of course. Sending you much love.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
See you on Monday, if not before.
This is the Santita
Yep,
Jackson
looking forward
Show.
to it. Thanks, everyone. It was really great to meet you all.
God bless you.
Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am grieving.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you on YouTube, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, as we were just talking with Aaron Neerman. If not now, Chicago. If not now, you've got Jewish Voices for Peace, Jewish Voice for Peace. They are having these flash protests, and they've been very successful, gathering hundreds, if not thousands of people. They said that now we got to disrupt so that we can get attention, not in a violent way, but in a non-violent way, in that tradition, sit-ins and things like that. That's part of disruption, which is part of a tradition that we share. And so please go to, if not now, Chicago. Please go to Jewish Voice for Peace, Chicago. There are people who are pulling for peace. And what we've been talking about today on the Santita Jackson Show with attorney C.K. Hoffler, Dwight McKee, and Dr. David Gibbs, and attorney Mark Fancher, and now attorney Daryl Jones and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, is the price that people who push for peace pay. Let me pivot to you, attorney Mark Fancher. I mean, because there is a price. I mean, Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker told Dr. King as soon as he walked out the pulpit that Riverside, April 4th, 1967, and he was murdered a year to the day, to the minute that he stepped in that pulpit in Memphis. April 4th, 1967, just after 6 p.m., he announced his opposition to the Vietnam War. April 4th, 1968, just after 6 p.m., they killed him. Ugh, it's just a lot. Mark Fancher?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot has to do with who you antagonize. So, for example, when Dr. King first began his public mission, his focus was on breaking down Jim Crow segregation. And the powers that be, the establishment, the capitalists, they really were on board with that mission. Not because they were benevolent or because they were interested in racial justice or anything like that, but what they understood is that segregation was not only segregating the people, it was segregating the money. And they were unable to have access to all the dollars that were in the Black community. And so for as long as Dr. King was advocating for desegregation, as long as he was advocating for opportunities for Black people to enter into public spaces where they could spend their money, then you notice that the media was more than happy to be present for the demonstrations that were being waged against Southern bigotry. They had those cameras trained on the demonstrators when fire hoses were trained on them and when dogs attacked them and when they were being beaten and buses were being set afire. They wanted to broadcast all of that to mobilize and galvanize public opinion in a way that would help Dr. King's mission succeed. But when Dr. King, through his continuing growth and political evolution, began to understand that this was his calling, was to do more than just break down segregation, but was also to bring about economic justice and to attack imperialism, to ensure that in this country that wealth was not hoarded by a select few, by an elite, and that everybody had an opportunity to have the necessities of life and to flourish economically, and that the U.S. should disengage from its military intervention in Southeast Asia, and that it should end militarism generally, it should end empire. When he began to deal with those kinds of things, then all of a sudden everybody turned on him. Certainly the media turned on him, and he was not getting the type of coverage that he once got. And even people within his inner circle They felt the pressure. They understood the intensity of the opposition to this. And they, too, began to try and persuade him that he really was getting out of his lane, that he was wading into waters that were very dangerous, and that he was exposing not only himself, but those around him to those same dangers. And so, unfortunately, as much as Dr. King is celebrated in this time, it is said that he went to his death honestly believing that he was a man without a friend in the world. And so when we look at what these young people are doing, people like Aaron Neerman and the organizations that he's working with, whether they realize it or not, they have waded into the same dangerous waters that Dr. King waded into. This issue of what the state of Israel is doing and what Zionism generally does is not just a matter of a few evil kinds of individuals who have decided to wage war against a defenseless population. Zionism is an integral part of global imperialism. It is essential. It is an essential tool that the empire uses in order to lock down the world and to lock down the world's resources. And it's an indispensable thing. And so anybody who wades into these waters is facing not just a few evil people who are in government positions in the state of Israel, but they're dealing with the empire, which is always a very dangerous kind of a thing to do. But one last thing that I think is a testament to the courage of the youth who are, of the Jewish faith and who begin to recognize and understand the contradictions of much of what they've been told since they were children, is that when you decide that you're going to speak up and speak out against anything that the U.S. government does, then you're going to face opposition, you're going to face criticism, and you might be called unpatriotic, you might be called misguided, you might be called a lot of things. Those who speak out, those who are of the Jewish faith and who are in some way connected to the state of Israel, who decide to speak out against Israel, are called all of those things. But in addition to that, the clear implication is that not only are you opposed to your own country or opposed to your own government, but the implication is that you're opposed to God, which is a really heavy kind of a thing for people to try and deal with. And so for those who are honest enough, those who are able to really look objectively at the contradictions of Zionism and the actions that are being taken by the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Forces, and to honestly look at what God is all about and what he would want, and then to make the correct decision about what's moral in this situation, about what's right in this situation. We have to do nothing but tip our hats to them and salute them.
Well, you see, Aaron is connected to, his inspiration has been his rabbi, and it's just, there is a moral imperative that's driving him, and that should be driving all of us in all of this. Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, your thoughts?
Good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues. As Mark Fancher was talking and just kind of thinking through this notion of where we are in terms of resistance, it took me back to the principles that kind of informed the Berlin Conference in 1884, when, in effect, the continent was basically carved up for economic exploitation. And there were certain principles, occupation principles, that were at play. I think what we have to be real clear on is there's the conflict, but then there's the effect of the conflict. And both of those have to be resisted, the loss of innocent life, but let's not be misguided here. That there's been recent conversation, and it's getting to be more pronounced, with really kind of the passive endorsement of the United States, that at the end of this conflict, this war, this taking of innocent life, there's going to be a period of occupation. That period of occupation is not benign. It doesn't just come with, we're just kind of here for the sake of being here. There's going to be this is a colonizing effort, not just in terms of the land, and as we talked about, Santita, what's under it and what's above it, right? What's adjacent to it. And so the protests are necessary, to Mark Fancher's point about having a moral cult, because at the root of this, when we invoke God, we have to be real clear that we're not always talking about the same reference, that there's some reference to God driving, motivating this, saying we're entitled to, we're the chosen ones. There's another reference to God that says God demands justice and mercy and peace. And so this is really not just a war of potential economic and political interests. It really is a war of moral ideas, spiritual guidance. And at the core of this, the protests are necessary as the full expression of the moral compass that drives this push, this commitment to justice, to peace, to equity, to freedom. All of those things that are at the root of this festering need. Now it has reached a boiling point. And yet there is this eerie sense that if we're not real careful, this will be another phase in the ongoing imperialist notion to expand and take land. There's a different driver here. And so the God factor has to be the one that we not lose sight of the fact that there is a higher purpose and a higher reason for the protests, for the resistance. And it's not just for a ceasefire. Ceasefire is phase one, but then we've got to get to the principles of justice and self-governance and freedom and the ability to live and thrive, not to be contained in a strip of land where those who are surrounding you can arbitrarily determine your movement and your agency. And so as we are looking at this, I think, one, we should support these young folks and join them, but also bear in mind that this is a calling for all of us to determine where we will fall, not only on the side of history, but on the side of righteousness in this moment, so that all voices are heard and that we do not continue to just be dragged along. It's like being drugged. We're being drugged into this foolishness like somehow or other we don't have anything to say about it. Resistance is the way that the people make sure that the government knows we're not for it, we're not with it, and we're not going to go along to get along as a part of it.
What are you thinking? I mean, you're in Washington, Attorney Daryl Jones. What are you seeing? We just had young Aaron Neerman, and you hear a growing chorus of voices from the Jewish community who are calling for a ceasefire, who are calling for an end to the apartheid state. They see the linkage between, they see their survival tied to the survival of the Palestinian people. It just seemed, and we're seeing hundreds of thousands and millions of people march on behalf of Palestinians. I mean, remember, when we were negotiating with the Democratic National Committee 40 years ago, you couldn't utter the proper noun Palestinian. They would call the P word, and it was whispered. And you were told, as we were negotiating, because Palestinian justice was part of Reverend Jackson's platform, you can't say that. The P word. If you put the P word out here, it's the room will clear. But something has changed, Daryl.
No, good morning, Santita. You're absolutely right. Let me start by saying I certainly admire Aaron's courage for standing up for his principles. And what Aaron is, 25 years old, so he's part of the Gen Z movement that's out there. And one thing that comes clear to me in listening to Aaron and the other Gen Zs is that, there's a consistency in what you're hearing. And that consistency is this. We know that the Gen Z generation, is the largest potential voting bloc in America, and they can make changes once they start going to the ballot to demand those changes. But even more so, we know that the Gen Z and the young Jewish leaders like Aaron that we're hearing, that they follow a national trend. They tend to be more open, more tolerant, more diverse, more multicultural, more ethnic. He demonstrates the diversity of the Jewish community, but not only that, there's a sense of oneness of humanity. And that's what I hear coming from Aaron as he was laying out his position and why, he and if not now are demanding the immediate ceasefire. CK raised the Ahmaud Arbery situation in talking about standing up against injustice and standing up against incredible odds against you. Aaron, and if not now, and those that are in that Generation Z movement with him are standing up to those same type of odds. It's that courage that it takes to say, I'm going to poke this bear because what it's doing is wrong. I don't agree with it. And that's what Aaron is doing. And you've just got to have, mad respect for him taking that position and knowing that there are repercussions that may come behind it. The advice is fully is completely well given that be lawyered up wherever you're going as you're going across the country with the movement. But it's also important to have the personal integrity and the courage to go forward with the movement during these times. One of the things that when I consider and look at the whole Middle East problem that's going on there between the Palestinians and the Jews, I start to wonder about the young Palestinians that are in the Gaza area that are watching their kids, their friends being killed from bombing, that are watching their parents' demise, their brothers, their sisters. They're growing up. They're going to be growing up with a certain bias against the people that are doing this to them. But when I listen to Aaron Neerman, I hear that generation say, no, we need to have a tolerance. We need to have a oneness. We need to come to a solution. We need to be certain that we're operating from a base of love, not a base of hate, and trying to get things resolved. That's what I hear coming from Aaron Santita, and it's going to be interesting to watch his movement move more strongly into the political realm as we get to this election season, and watch them exercise that power through the ballot box and people that are consistent and candidates that are consistent with their principles.
So let me ask you this, Dr. Gibbs. What are you hearing? I mean, just the historical trends. You're an historian. When you hear Aaron, when you see, we're seeing something, quite frankly, that we haven't seen. Who would have thought that everything would have been stirred up in the Middle East domestically as things have been stirred up now? I mean, these kids are being told, we're not going to let you be employed, and this thing, I'm going to stand up anyway, with $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 worth of debt. They're going on. You've got Aaron Neerman. I mean, you've got this young lady, Allie, in the NPR report. Her parents banish her from Shabbat. I mean, my God, but that can happen, when you take those stances. But they're going on anyway, Dr. Gibbs. Is Dr. Gibbs still there? Well, let me go to you, Dwight. Is anyone still there?
Well,
okay.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Well, you have to understand that it was a Jew that said that we should beat our swords into plowshares. And it was a Jew that said, thou shalt not murder. And it was a Jew that was on the cross and looked down and said, Father, forgive them, if they know not what they do. Now, all of them had have a price to pay when they took those positions, because the Bible says they stoned the prophets, but that nevertheless didn't stop them from prophesying. And so I think that when Aaron talks about coming out of that tradition of Judaism, I think that's what he has reference to, is that the Jewish tradition is a lot different than the Zionist position. The Jewish position is one of equity and love and justice. Well, the Zionist position is more of land and power and acquisition and control. And so you have two different traditions running counter to one another. And each of them are going to have a price to pay for their convictions. But the price that one pays, that those who are for peace, will probably be much different, much more intense than the price the other one pays for empire. Which is why I said that the status quo is the only real protected class. So you can only applaud in Aaron and his movement. And it gives guys like me and guys like Mark real hope that this next generation is going to really work to make things better, and to not see themselves as an extension of empire, but see themselves as an extension of justice. It is very invigorating to watch that crowd mature and sacrifice themselves and to get out there.
Well, I guess, Mark, it does come down to those who are going to be imperialist or those who are not.
Oh, it does. You really can't you can't straddle the fence on that because there's a dialectical relationship between the push for justice, economic, political, social, and otherwise, and imperialism, which is opposed to all of those things. And they're really at war with each other. And, as Dwight was saying, I think that it's inspiring that these young people are committed to taking on this battle. And, I think that for those of us who are older, I think they would benefit from hearing from us the ways in which, over time, the actions that they take, that all of us take, really begin to bear fruit. And, it's really a matter of reflection. I know that when I was his age, well, a little bit younger, when I was in college, the idea that Nelson Mandela would be released from Robben Island was just unthinkable. I really honestly believed that the man was going to die in that prison.
We all did, Mark.
The idea...
all did. It just seemed impossible, right?
Absolutely impossible. The idea that that apartheid as a system would crumble seemed absolutely impossible. I really believed that because people fight so hard for justice and won't give up, that was going to just result in an absolute bloodbath, which nobody would win. Even I did not believe when I was in college that Zimbabwe would become independent. At the time, it was known as Rhodesia, and it was so brutal that they would send agricultural workers out into the fields in the morning, black agricultural workers, and without watches or clocks, tell them that they'd better be back at the end of the day to get on the truck or they would be shot. And they would shoot people who were running across the field trying to get to the truck late. I mean, I thought that would never crumble, and that happened within a year after I graduated from college. So there are remarkable, amazing miracles that happen when people continue to agitate and continue to speak up. And that's why you always have to do it, even if you're frustrated, even if it seems like you're shouting into the wind and that nobody is listening. They are. Things are happening. We continue to see amazing changes. And even this issue that we're talking about in terms of Palestine, you've already alluded to it. It was just unthinkable that we would even be at this point where there are so many people who are conscious and aware of the contradictions of Zionism and would be speaking publicly about it in the way that they are. This is all amazing. It's miraculous. God's hand is in it. And as long as we just trust that it is and continue to do what we're supposed to do, he'll do what he has to do. And we'll all come out victorious in the end.
It's amazing because CK, these last 2 minutes, these are the forces who tried to run Reverend Jackson's candidacy off the rails. I remember that so clearly. And now everything has changed and everything is changing, CK. And yet you tell them you need legal representation. I hear you. The last 2 minutes, why?
Well, they need legal representation, just like we all needed legal representation when we were protesting when I was in law school and from the South African embassy. Your dad, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Randall Robinson and other great leaders were out there. And we felt, well, they're there. We're protected by them. Because if they're standing, we can stand with them. This is another, but a synonymous movement. And it's got to be a movement, but you must have legal counsel. There were lawyers that were standing there with the protesters to make sure that if they were arrested, they would be released. And in fact, ultimately, there were negotiations so that people didn't have records. So it's very, 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 very important for them to end what they're doing, to have legal counsel, because he said this is a well-executed, well-strategized, well-organized. And I cannot imagine that part of that is not the legal part. I feel very confident that they have the legal part in tow with them. But in case they don't, that really must be a priority, because there's one thing that can kill a movement, and that is when there is not adequate legal representation, and when there is manipulation and corruption that seeps in to the judicial system, causing people to remain in jail. Yes, they can be martyred, but what he is doing with his peers and those who stand in solidarity are doing is a movement where people have to be in the street. It's not a movement where they can be martyrs behind bars. So lawyers are who can help them, I believe, in that journey. They're not the only groups of professionals, but definitely they must have strong lawyers who are willing to stand with them every single place that they go. Not some of the main places, but every single place. And they can accomplish that. And I'm pretty sure, based on listening to that young man, that they have that as part of their strategy, because they understand the reality of where they are headed with this fight.
Going to get some closing thoughts from the rest of this panel on the Santita Jackson Show. If not now, Chicago, you can get in touch with them, Jewish Voice for Peace in Chicago and in New York and in D.C. It's interesting, CK, I want to ask you about this on the other side on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, that they're doing flash protests. Think about that. Can't wait to be with you on Keep It Alive on Sunday. Until then, have a beautiful day, everybody. God bless you. It's interesting that they're having flash protests. You know, CK. I mean, they're not. And Dwight, I know you caught this, and Reverend Yeri and Attorney Jones. He said, "I'm not going to give the details just for reasons of strategy." Well, before I ask you that, CK, why do you think that is, Dwight? Just given your history in protest.
Well, I think they've learned from the past that is if the FBI and the police can prepare and anticipate their movements, that they will be there to meet them, which is what happened in the Democratic National Convention when Grant Park became, the place that everybody met. But when they met there, they only not just met the congressmen who they were marching against, they met the police there, who then proceeded to have a police riot and beat them in the head, even though the whole world was watching. And so I think in this generation, what they do, because they have the benefit of the internet, is they announce it at the day and the hour, and they move on it before the police can even respond to it or react to it, which is very, very, very wise. It gives them a strategic advantage, and it shows that they're thinking strategically rather than just emotionally.
CK, how do you organize when they're organizing that way? I mean, as lawyers.
Well, because they must have a legal advisor with them who knows how they're organizing. So that's what I'm saying. I feel very confident. I mean, everybody has to have, just as Dr. King has, everybody must have their lawyer present with them. Now, other people may not need to know all the details, but the lawyer does need to know, one lawyer, so that lawyer can orchestrate when appropriate and be there. So I think that it is a strategic move. That's what today we are living in an age where wars are fought in large part based on what social media, or fought or defended based on what people are gathering in social media. So they have the benefit of having social media and being able to drop on whatever platforms information and codes and stuff that we didn't have and that did not exist 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I think that's a strong strategic move for them, but they, of course, must have their legal counsel in on it, at least one of them, to be able to advise them along the way, whatever jurisdiction, what are the laws of that state, what could happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They must have that. None of that negates the need for them to have strong, not just legal counsel, strong legal counsel that will be with them and who has a network to help them.
Reverend Dr. Yeri, what's next? I mean, Chaparral just said she bumped into one of these flash protests last night. She said it took her an hour and a half to get home because, I mean, they're just bubbling up.
Well, protests are protests, right? They are often spontaneous. I think that we have to be those who are supporting this kind of expression. I think part of our baseline ability to be supportive is the willingness to be maybe delayed or inconvenienced, whatever that might be, right? These voices need to be heard. The reason these flash protests are critically important is we've seen even recently what trying to coordinate, trying to inform, trying to make sure that the authorities know that we're gathering peacefully, what that can do. And I'll just simply take you back to the immediate aftermath of Breonna Taylor's killing in Louisville. The NFAC, which is often coined as a black militia, organized and came to Louisville a couple of times. And one time they came to Louisville and coordinated with the police department, met with the president of the local governing council to make sure that everybody knew that these black folk in black uniforms with black weapons were going to organize peacefully, and they did. What happened, though, was in the course of that, the leader was with the police and was not sure who was standing on the top of a parking deck downtown. There had been an earlier incident where a sniper rifle had been found in one of the parking decks that looked down on the square where folks had been gathering. And so what he did was, to be able to see who was up there, he used the scope that was on his weapon to kind of see who's up there. What they ended up charging him with was pointing a weapon at a law enforcement official. He's now in federal prison. So the tactics that are often used to derail and disempower these resistance movements has to be countered. The new tactic has to be like we saw with the labor union strikes, right? We're not going to come at you the way we've come at you before. The principles are still guiding, but the process is changing so that we can still make sure that we engage according to our commitment to the moral compass that's guiding us without leaving ourselves exposed to be undermined in the process. And I certainly agree with CK's point that the one person that has to know and has to be able to help with the kind of the back end coordination, making sure that the resources, the assets, the insights are all in place is the attorney. Because at the end of the day, they will use the law to disempower and dismantle your movement even before it gets started.
Attorney Darrell Jones.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Todd has laid out with regards to certainly having the counsel. And I would take it a step further, perhaps, because I would certainly encourage them to have local counsel, someone who is familiar with the players that are on the ground in the very area that you're going into. I think that's extremely important. I think it's a great strategy using the flash protests because I think that the unexpected aura that brings with it puts them, as Dwight McKee was saying, in a position of power from a strategy standpoint. It allows them to organize and to be able to get their points out without being suppressed from the very beginning, without being herded into a particular area or rounded up before they could even get started. So whether they're doing it as a flash protest in and of itself, meaning something that's organic for them and their purpose, or if they're moving into, some other area where there's another rally or protest that's happening and they're going to do a flash protest within the protest. All of that becomes really key with regards to their usage of, Instagram and all the other social media tools that they're going to have available with them, including Signal, so they can't be detected in their communications. But certainly, hats off to them with regards to what they're doing. It's going to be very interesting to see what the next steps are following the flash protests. Where do they then go from there? And I'd be certainly encouraging of them to turn that into the political muscle and the political power at the ballot box as we're moving into to elected officials that are going to be making these decisions.
Dwight McKee, what do you see? What's next? What did you think of? I mean, what do you think of what these young people are doing? Is this reminiscent of anything you've seen before?
Well, I'm hoping that it shows up in both organizing politically, and it shows up in the vote. And it's just, it's not just protest, and the protest is effective, But I think they should focus on some of these politicians who have taken this hard line against the Palestinians and against peace, and take all of the weight that they have and the margins that they are in the electoral process, and vote against these guys and get them out of office. And I think they should pool their money and become a counter to organizations like APEC and help lobby, for peace, like some of these other lobbyists lobby for war. So I'm hoping they become as much institutionalized as they are protest-based.
Well, CK, I know you're running today, but what's your final thought here?
My final thought on Santita is we all have to watch these young folks. I agree with Daryl Jones said about, they are the voting bloc, the Gen X. They are the voting bloc. They are the people that stand on the shoulders of the great warriors, Reverend Jackson, people like Dwight McKee and others that have paved the way. So we need to watch them because they're going to make a difference in this presidential election. If they are smart, and because of Aaron spoke very deliberately when he said this is a well-orchestrated plan. They're not leaving much to be. I think they have thought through the strategy. They've been thinking about this and working on this for a very, very long time. And if not long time, certainly in hours. So we need to watch them. They're going to be a game changer, I think, in the upcoming presidential election. And that's why they have to have, and I'm sure they do, their legal team in place. Because voting, the ability and the power of this movement to pose a real and significant impact on the next presidential elections is where they derive their power, in my impression, in this country. Our policy towards Israel is going to be our policy towards Israel. Joe Biden, I've said this before, is doing what other presidents like him have done. That policy is not going to change. That what needs to change is perhaps, and what groups like this and others need to do, is impress upon the president, put him in a position where he is telling our allies, telling that we are supporting in this war, that it's time for a de-escalation. It's time for a ceasefire plus. It's time. That's what it has to be, because our policy is not going to change. I'm just a realist with that. But that doesn't mean that there has to be a massacre and complete annihilation of a people, because we are inching towards a world war. I think I look at it in terms of a world war, a third world war. We are almost there. That's the downside. That's what we need to be afraid of. That's why we have to look at young people in this country standing in solidarity and saying no, because we are inching towards a third world war. So for those of them in our generation, and Santita, I just lie about my age so much. Was when Mark said that he and Aaron were about the same age, I was like, that's what I usually say. But for those of us who are in that other generation, I just have to face it for this purpose. We don't want to see. We know what it is. We don't want to see a third world war. Young people may not recognize what that, they kind of know intellectually, but recognize what that would mean. And that's where we are. Our children, our men and women are already deployed. They're already in position. The U.S. has already taken its position globally as it relates to this, and we're already engaged. So, can that be reversed? Of course it can be reversed. Does every president have a war? Of course every president has a war or two. Every single president of the United States in my lifetime has had a war or two. This president is no different. Does that mean that we can't still impose upon and put pressure on the administration to do things differently? Of course we can. But it's not going to just happen because, we think that way. It's going to happen because there's a presidential election and people want to win. We listen very carefully to what Donald Trump said, the front runner for the Republican Party. And who knows what's going to happen with all of his litigation. We can't count on the litigation keeping him from the White House at all. We can count on him maybe being convicted. We can count on him maybe being lined up with the Secret Service to go to jail. But we can't count on that preventing him from being the president of the United States. So if we listen very carefully to what he's saying, he's hedging and trying to get support for his bid, and he's trying to appeal to those votes, those Gen X folks. And so I think that we have to really, really follow very carefully, watch them. Everybody has a role that they can play in the de-escalation of this conflict so that we don't find ourselves in a world war where all of us will be losers. We are already losing in this war. Each and every American is losing in this war. There's no question about it. But when we get to world war, it's over.
But you know what I would
Life
say?
as we know it will be over.
Let me say this. I think we're already winning because I'm seeing the shift. I lived through it. I mean, I lived through, just on a personal level, the price that my parents and family paid for our support, our calling for the linkage of Israeli security to Palestinian justice. Things are changing. I would respectfully disagree. I think things are, not only are things changing, things are going to change. The position that Joe Biden had before, he's going to have to change if he has a prayer. And any Democrat who's going to step into his shoes, should he not run, should he not be the nominee, they're going to have to change because the world is demanding it. And when the world demands it, when your activism pushes the needle, things change. Now, do they change on a deeper level? No, you have to keep on pushing because you can't push for a cosmetic change. You have to continue to push for a deeper change. And that means that the struggle continues and victory is certain, as you remind us, CK, if you continue with the struggle. You know, I mean,
I think you should continue with the struggle. I'm not saying it won't.
No.
I'm saying your policy fundamentally ain't going to.
I'm just saying when we're talking politics, we have to split hairs, as we're saying, because you were saying that things just a few minutes ago, you said things won't change, and I'm like, no.
But your policy won't change.
Okay.
So we got to hear what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is, I disagree with that respectfully. So I think U.S. policy is going to have to change because it's just like South African policy had to change because they could not be part of the community of nations under apartheid. It just didn't work. And to show you how,
right. And I agree with you on South Africa, but I don't see it changing. Not now. Well, not before the presidential election.
I didn't put a timestamp on it. I didn't put a timestamp on it.
Well, I mean,
we didn't expect this here.
I don't know in my lifetime.
Well, I'm saying
not now.
What I'm saying to you is I didn't expect this to happen here. So I can't put a timestamp on it. I never would have thought it just 2 or 3 months, just before October 7th, excuse me. Before October 7th, we're seeing like the dam broke. You didn't have these pro-Palestinian marches before October 7th. And the way the media were pushing the story, you were not going to see them. But somehow or another, they popped up out the ground. And I'm just, we can respectfully disagree and love each other. And
we do, but I want to make sure, I'm clear with my message because I'm evidently not.
And the reason I'm pushing, wait one moment. The reason I'm pushing is for you to split hairs and to be very clear on your message, because when you're in the political space, there is no space. And I want people to absolutely understand what you are saying. So there you go.
Well, what I'm saying to me is clear, but I'm a lawyer, so sometimes clarity is what's clear to me may not be clear to everyone. U.S. policy is not going to change as it relates to Israel, period, in the discussion. That's what I'm saying. That's clear. It's not going to happen anytime soon. That doesn't mean that there cannot be a de-escalation of the war in Gaza. That doesn't mean that a lot of the things that this young Aaron and other people are fighting for, and those of us who stand in solidarity and don't want to see this world war, that doesn't mean that cannot happen simply because U.S. policy as it relates to Israel is not going to change. So the two of them are not inconsistent. They're not mutually exclusive. That's why it's important to fight. With all the fights over in my lifetime as it relates to this conflict, there has been a change in how things have been perceived, but U.S. policy has been the same. So what I'm saying is, and when I say U.S. policy, globally, Israel is going to be our ally. We're going to support Israel. That's not changing. Period. End of discussion. Will we have the ability to de-escalate and prevent a world war? Absolutely. In keeping with what our U.S. policy is. And how that will happen is when the American people, if groups, people stand in solidarity, voice their opinion, and use their leverage as we are approaching a presidential election. But fundamentally, our policy ain't going nowhere.
Well,
That's what I'm.
And I hear you. I just disagree. I'm not saying that I didn't put a timestamp on it. I didn't say by the time the election, but I don't know. I know that privately, Joe Biden got on a plane and went over and saw Bibi Netanyahu and said, I support you. I'm helping to pay for this thing, but you're going to have to do this differently. Now they're beginning to push, and it's beginning to get leaked out. A humanitarian cause, y'all going to have to do this because I'm catching heat at home. They have intelligence. They understand that there's something that is shifted out here. You've got the global South who have pushed up against them while the world is de-dollarizing. You've got the Arab nations united in a way that they have not been since 1947. When you have all these moving parts, only heaven knows what's going to happen. But stay right there, CK, because I want Mark Fancher. I want everybody to respond before we get out of here. Mark Fancher, are you still there? He might not be. Daryl Jones, and then Dwight, you can begin to wrap us up. Is Daryl there? Okay. Dwight, your thoughts.
My thoughts is that there will be that the policies are going to stay intact, but the reality is going to have to shift. And the reality being that they want to have carte blanche. The Zionists want to have carte blanche to just decimate the country like they, in fact, would want to have. And even though they will still be committed to the proposition of total destruction and the domination of Gaza, the reality of the politics will force them to have to make adjustments, and will force Biden to force them to make adjustments, because the pressure he's going to be under and the United States is going to be under is going to be so formidable that he'd have no option but to force them to get off of their dogmatic position that they have to be the dominant, they have to dominate and ultimately eradicate Giza. I think that they will still philosophically, I'm with TK, they will still philosophically be committed to that. But I also see your side, Santita, that the external pressures will force them to have to make adjustments, even though they don't want to make those adjustments. And I think the other thing
if I may say, we're in agreement. I'm not saying that on paper things have changed, but practically, it's a different day. On paper, they can do whatever it is that they want to do.
And I think the other realities of what's happening in the Ukraine as Russia dominates that war, and what's happening with the BRIC countries in terms of them getting off American currencies, and what's happening with the geopolitics of America, the electoral politics, with these Arab constituencies organizing and turning the tide of the politics of the states. I think there's going to be a lot of changes made, because I don't think that when they jumped on Israel at this level, I don't think they anticipated the backlash. And the backlash is real. And particularly for a lot of these Jewish students, like the young brother we had on today, like Aaron, is that when they see their classmates begin to turn on them in ways that it's hard even for them to believe, to conceive, that, they have to rethink what they've been programmed to believe about themselves, that what makes them the chosen people it's not the biology of being chosen. It is God choosing them to make right choices theologically and morally. And they become the chosen people if they choose to become the chosen people, but they're chosen for righteousness. They're not chosen for domination. And I think it gives them an opportunity to have to rethink that. So there are things going to be a changing as Snuffy Smith used to say. But it's going to be a hard-fought, bloody, in your face kind of change that is going to take, blood and toil to make.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but it's here. And there it is. It is hard, but it is here. It is here. And the changes, everybody, take place on deeper levels. It's just like the dermis, your skin. You scrape, and then there's another layer, and another layer, and another layer, and another layer, and another struggle, and another struggle, and another struggle. The baton continues to need to be picked up. Every generation has their fight, and so it's a wonderful thing to see. Is it going to be tough? Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be hard to see, but it is something that we need to see, and it's something that needs to happen. I mean, just the change. CK, I mean, I agree with what you and Dwight have said. On paper, I mean, this is a hard rock to move, but it's going to be moved. Might not happen in my lifetime. I don't worry about that. I just know the book of Revelations is real. I know that God already won, and God just needs I need to be witness. And as my mother used to say, God needs some street Jesus, and God needs some street fighters. I just want to be on God's side. When I meet my Savior face to face, or if Jesus just gets in my ear when I get to the other side, you done good, child. That's all I want. I want to do justice. I want to be merciful. And I want to be humble before God. And I want to do God's will. That's it. And I know God's will does not have people living in an open air prison where 96% of the water is undrinkable, where women are having C-sections on the floors of hospitals that are being bombed, and they're not being given painkillers. I know that is not God's will. That is not God's way. And everybody does not sign up for that. Some people do. Some of these Israeli doctors have called for the bombings of hospitals, and then there are other Israeli doctors who've called for them to be dismissed from the profession. And I'm just saying, everybody, these thoughts and feelings are much more nuanced. And we need to support those who want to do justice. Even as we might have disagreements with one another, let's push toward the mark, press toward the mark. That's what the Bible tells us to do. So Dwight McKee, C.K. Hoffler, Attorney Darrell Jones, Attorney Mark Fancher, Reverend Dr. Todd Huey, Dr. David Gibbs, Shanina Knighton, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, and my team at WCPT. I'm sending you all so much love today. Have a great, great day. Have a great weekend. I'm sure we'll be talking about some of this on Keep Up Alive on Sunday. In the meantime, have a great day. Just enjoy the day. It's going to be a little crisp today in Chicago, but it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful day. And I hope that you get a chance to enjoy it. I love you, everybody. Love you, CK. Love you, Dwight. I am out of here.
All right.
In case there's
Bye-bye.
something else you want to say, CK, aside from getting the legal advice.
No. Other than, as your dad says, keep hope alive. And without fighting, life will be the same. So I think, we all fight, and we all have a place to fight, a space to fight. And especially when we see suffering and injustice. And people just need to have, if you're going to take it on, a good legal team.
You better have CK, I tell you that. The CK's at the ready. Because she knows we will get arrested. And she wants to know, what have you done? First thing she sounds is worried. Every time you call her, first thing she does is, what have you done? What have you done? She's there. And I'm going to pass your number on to Aaron, if you don't mind, because I think that, we need to be.
I think they have it covered. But if they don't have it covered, maybe they need to look at it. It's always good. It's always good to just check, make sure you go through your list of things that you need to have.
Well, I know.
Sometimes,
I think that having the chair of Rainbow Push on their speed dial will be important because they are anxious for allies. And I am really glad to see that they were willing to be allied with us today. And so that is That's the blessing. That's the blessing. That's the blessing. We've been very, very blessed, and I'm blessed that he reached out. Thank you, Jeff Cohen, for making that happen. And let's go, everybody. We got a lot of work to do. Got a lot of work to do. Got a lot of work to do. Love you all, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the show today. I'm glad you enjoyed the show, and I want you to know that there are. Let's not judge a book by its cover. Don't do that, because you don't know what someone's life experiences will push them to do. You know, you don't know. You really don't. You don't know. We have to respect that. And pray for that young Allie who we read about in NPR, whose family banned her from Shabbat. That has to be very painful for her. But I'm praying that they will all remain together in spirit and in fact. So I love you, everybody. God bless you. Love you, CK. Love you, Dwight. Love you, my WCPT team. God bless you. Have a great day.